morning.
You, Marty, can we have a mic check from you? Good morning.
Good morning, Janelle. Good morning, everyone. How's that sounding?
It sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Good morning, Eric. Eric, you need to unmute your mic, please.
Okay,
There you go. Good morning.
good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Sarbacher. Good morning, Commissioner Meyer.
It's Wilson. I am here. If you can all hear me.
Morning, Commissioner Wilson.
Morning, Tom.
Morning. I saw Michael smile first, so I know he heard my voice.
That's why video works so well, because you don't have to say much sometimes.
And I even got video. It's a little odd today, isn't it? I feel very, yeah. I don't have the best studio lighting going on here.
Yeah.
But it's functional. I kind of like my other picture that I put in here. What do you think of that?
Nice.
I think that was actually a picture that was taken for MMSD, albeit a while ago. So I'll leave that up for a while.
Good morning, Commissioner Meyer. Can you hear us?
Janelle, Commissioner Meyer needs to call in. So that was that phone number I just admitted.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't have both video and audio.
Morning. I'm here. If you can hear me, we're good.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Eskridge.
Good morning, Janelle.
Good morning, Commissioner Murphy. Good morning, Commissioner Murphy. Can you hear us?
I can.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's 8 a.m. I think we have everybody but Grant on. Is that correct? In terms
That
of
looks
commissioners? Okay. And we've had a couple people that that registered, but I'm not sure if they'll speak when we get to the public hearing or on the other appearances by the public, but we'll find out at that point. So we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to all our guests. Janelle, do you have any, you want to provide the virtual meeting guidance?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Havel. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting today, I'm going to review just a couple decorum rules for everyone to please follow. So number one, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number two, please state your name before speaking, and also would help us if you told us the entity you are with, if you are a member of the public. And number three, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host at any time during this meeting. So those are all the decorum rules we have today. And let's have a great meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. That takes us to announcements. Michael, do we have any announcements for today?
No announcements, President Hubble.
Okay, no announcements. That will take us to item 2, appearances by the public. Is there anybody in the public that has anything to say? We'll have the public hearing. So anything other than the public hearing item number 4 on the budget. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the consent calendar, where we have the approval of the meeting minutes from the September 10th meeting. We have an expedited annexation, Tice Trust Property, City of Madison. And we have the review and approval of sewer extension plan, new construction project in the Village of Dane. And then we have the property tax levy resolution that says we're not going to do the property tax levy. Do we have any questions, anything before we move to get a motion? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion, Commissioner Clark.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Clark, second by
It's Wilson, I'll second.
Commissioner Wilson. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar, say aye.
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 And any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. That will take us to the public hearing and discussion on the 2021 proposed operating capital projects and debt service budgets. We had a couple of people that registered, Mr. Sarbacher and Mr. Hessling. Do any of them wish to, or anybody else wish to make any comments on the proposed budgets that are up for public hearing? Okay, we'll ask once again, anybody have any comments on the proposed budgets that are up for public hearing? Any member of the public before we move on to any commission discussion? And okay, hearing none, we'll move on to any commission discussion. Michael, do you have anything you wish to add from your earlier presentation last meeting?
I did have a few things, and I had an abbreviated summary presentation, and just in case there are members of the public who didn't hear it 2 weeks ago. But there are a few things that I'd like to just share that I didn't share 2 weeks ago about our revenue, about our revenues. Just a reminder, and for the members of the public who are on this call, that as we discuss the 2021 budget, it always is very helpful to reflect on what's happening this year, because it's been such an unusual year for all of our communities, and of course for the district. Our revenues are, as we've been sharing with the commission, are down $1.9 million, or are projected to be by the end of the year. And our expenditures, because we anticipated that, we curtailed spending significantly this year, and we expect expenditures to be down $1.6 million. Usually by the end of the year, our expenditures are about $400,000 lower than our budgeted amount, and we were able to do that. And because of that, we're able to increase our operating reserves for 2021. We projected we would use about $750,000 of operating reserves this year. You may recall when we came with the budget amendment in January, we have not had to use that. So that's all good news, and that sets us up for this next year. I'm going to see if, let me hold on a second here, make sure I have the right presentation. I want to make sure that can the commission see? I don't know if you're seeing my screen of the operating budget. Do you see this?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You're not
See, it's-
sharing it, Michael.
Okay. Thank you. Well, maybe I don't have to share the screen. That's maybe not that important at this point. I do want to say that, we're proposing a budget where expenditures are increasing by 5.2%, and overall. And what is in that 5.2% are general costs for our increased investment in capital, our Clean Water Fund capital, debt service spending. Our capital program is ramping up. We are using more cash to fund capital, and the transfer of cash into the capital fund we're doing at commission direction. And also we have some minor expenditures. We're investing in employees through a market adjustment and one new staff member, and investing in some projects for next year with PFAS and other projects that we have to do some studies on. So that is really what makes up the $2 million in the 5.2%. As you know, in the next meeting, or in 2 meetings from now, we'll be taking the budget, which is what are the expenditures, what do we need to operate the district for the next year, and translate that and distribute those costs to our customer communities, our owner communities, and through connection charges and other things. And that 5.2% is what I call what we have to recover in terms of more money, but how that actually translates to our owner communities can vary quite a bit based on the flows and loadings. And so we had to predict flows and loadings for next year, and we predicted, and we're predicting them to be lower. And what that means is the rate goes up because flows and loadings will be lower, but the actual service charges paid on average and overall will still be the same. But that varies between community based on your proportionate share of those flows and loadings, which can vary quite significantly. Some of the things communities have an influence over are the number of new connections, and growth can increase your flows and loadings. and growth communities will see that many times if their charges are going up, it's because they're giving us more flows and loadings. Inflow and infiltration has an impact on the revenues or the charges that owner communities pay us. And while our communities do have some influence over reducing those flows, it's a long-term proposition. And as we're working right now with our owner communities on I&I inflow and infiltration policies and ways to reduce flows, we just had a subcommittee meeting yesterday. It's really a long-term investment in reducing those flows. But that is one way that there can be variations from community to community based on if there's an extremely wet year and high groundwater. Some communities that have a lot of I&I will have quite a bit more. And so while the 5.2% is there, what we actually recover can vary from community to community. So with that, I'll just turn it back over to you, President Howell, with that overview.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Does anybody have any questions or any discussion that they wish to have on the proposed budget at this point?
Yeah, thank you. I just quickly, I wanted to pass on that I happened to run into the director of Wanakee Utilities, and he said a couple things which I wanted to pass on. The first one was, because I asked him, hey, he asked me, and I'm quoting, how's that MMSD spot going for you? And I said, it's going great. I think we're doing a good job. And he said, well, I think that the district does a good job too. He said, I think Michael has some great ideas, and I really look forward to hearing from him, which might be a hint that he was asking for maybe showing up at their utility district meeting more or something. I don't know. He didn't say that. I just got the feeling that he just liked hearing from you. And he also said, just keep in mind that the rate increases really do affect our customers. And I know that these are trying times for everybody, but at the same time, just please keep that in mind, Tom, because we don't want to see rates. I think Wanakee's rate last year must have went up a lot. They're pretty high. And he said he sat in on the budget here on the budget presentation and has reviewed it a couple times and really had no problem with it. So I wanted to pass that on so that everybody could hear that, just not me. And I asked him if I could do that, and he said, sure. That's all I got, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. That's good to know. And I think Michael's going to be speaking at the Cities and Villages Association next week, Wednesday. So if he attends that, he'll get some idea of information.
A welcome opportunity.
Yeah. Presentation a second time, yeah.
And I will attend the utility or village board meetings if they want to fit me into their schedule. I love doing that. So
okay. So if anybody hears of any, I see the thumbs up from Tom. Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments on the budget? I think we all understand the difficult times we're in, and that this may move into 2021, partially or wholly. Things may be shut down, and they were talking about 1/3 of the restaurants in the state closing within the next few months, 5 to 6 months, I believe. So that would probably affect loadings until this moves on and the things backfill in. Okay, hearing no other comments or questions, we'll end item number 4 and move on to item 5 with Eric Helen, the approval of contract award of increase of total project costs for pump station 17 force main relief phase 1. Eric, you have a presentation?
I do. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Eric Jellin, project engineer with the sewer district. And let me queue up my presentation here.
While Eric is queuing up the presentation, I wanted to give you kind of a broad overview of this project. There's some really unique elements that Eric will be sharing with you in this. We partnered with Verona on a project because we're co-locating facilities, and the commission should be, is probably aware of when we have done that before with the city of Madison, and how that can be problematic to do that, because when bids come in, if one bid is advantageous to one community and not to another, it can raise concerns, and we had experienced that with a project. Knowing that, our engineering department with Bruce and Eric set up a new structure for how we're going to do that for this project, which takes some of that risk and unbalance out of the equation. And so I'm really supportive of this, and the action for the commission. What's a little bit unique about the action today is you're not awarding a construction contract to a contractor. What you're doing is you're approving the amount, and we are asking Verona to award the contract. So it's a little bit of a nuance, and Eric will share that with you. So I just wanted to lead this off with that discussion. So go ahead, Eric. I'll stop talking.
Okay, can you see my screen now? I'm sorry, I forgot to share it earlier.
You're not sharing, Eric.
I can't see it.
Okay, hold on 1 second. We practiced this yesterday. Try screen one. How about now?
Nope. Do you have multiple screens open?
I do.
So it must be on the other screen.
All right, sorry, we did do this. We practiced this yesterday and it worked. All right. Oh, maybe I didn't press share. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes. Now we have it.
All right, let me get the slideshow going. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm presenting on approval of the contract award and increased in total project cost for the pumping station 17 force main relief. What you're seeing on the screen in green, the green dashed line, that is the pump station 17 force main relief project, the phase one. The need for this, the reason for this project is additional capacity is needed approximately 2025 due to growth in the city of Verona and in the lower Badger Mill Creek basin on the west side of Madison. In approximately 2025, we will complete the lower Badger Mill Creek interceptor, phase 5 of that. That's on the left side of the screen. I'm pointing to it with my cursor right now. There's a City of Madison lift station at Midtown Road. And at that time, that lift station will be relieved by the lower Badger Mill Creek interceptor, and all that flow is going to go to pump station 17 in Verona. This is phase one. The schedule is being driven by the city of Verona. I'll discuss their portion of the project on the next slide. And for phase two, just to let you know, we will need to go from the end of this green line, the end of this project, we'll need to connect to the to our existing interceptor system. So the next 3 slides are going to be just a little bit closer view of the project corridor. What you're seeing on this slide, the yellow line, is actually the joint project with us and the city of Verona. There's going to be 2 pipes installed. They are replacing the green line is their existing east side interceptor. It has reached capacity. It's got a lot of I&I problems. So their portion of the project, they're going to replace that, and they're going to abandon the existing east side interceptor. The red line is our existing pump station 17 force main. Again, we're going to need additional capacity in that system. And so our project is going to build a new relief force main. We're going to keep the existing force main and we'll have a second additional force main. Pump station 17 is right in the middle of this slide. Also the large building with the green roof. That's the Verona Department of Public Works. And I wanted to say, you know, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the city in February of last year. And we've been working with Theron Jacobson, the Verona Public Works Director, and his staff. And they've taken the lead on negotiating easements and permits. We've been involved too. It's been great working with them, professional staff. Really appreciate the work that they've done and the professionalism and working with them. Yeah, as I said, the phase 1 portion is being driven by the city's schedule. They need to replace the existing east side interceptor now. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So again, this is just moving up the corridor to the north a little bit. Yellow is still our project. The green line is the existing east side interceptor. The red line is the existing MMSD pump station 17 force main. There will be shared construction costs on this. So in addition to the savings on easements and permits, a little bit on design, we'll save on construction as well. For instance, in this photograph, you can see we're crossing the stream a couple times there. So, you know, all the clearing and grubbing, we'll share those costs, mobilization, dewatering. Dewatering is going to be a large portion of the costs on this project. Erosion controls, stream bank protection. I'm going to get into a little bit on the cost split now. And again, we've just moved up a little bit to the north here. The yellow line is the project that I'm speaking of, the phase 1. On the opinion of probable construction costs, so the OPC, there were 96 bid items, and the cost split for construction is based on a review of the opinion of probable construction costs. I'm going to back up a little bit and describe how we have done projects in the past. What we've done is, you know, so I'm going to use this one as an example. There's our project and then Verona's project. I'll call ours project A and Verona project B. So we would take our project A and figure out all the bid items that are associated with that. What are our items, our force main, and anything else associated with our force main. And then they would take their project and figure out, okay, what are our bid items? And then each project would be, they would be bid together, but they would be separate projects. So the award is based on project A plus project B. And
a battery hole is never a good idea.
what Eric? Anyway, yeah, so what can happen, what often happens is somebody's unhappy. You know, somebody, we say, well, you know, we got a really high price on our pipe and Verona got a better price on their pipe, and we don't really know why. It just happens. So sometimes it happens that somebody is unhappy in the end, whether it's us or Verona. So what we've done this time is myself, Theron Jacobson, Bruce Borelli, we sat down before the bid opening. We took the opinion of probable construction costs and we went through item by item and we did assign items. So we said, okay, well, here's our force main pipe. So we're going to pay for 100% of that. Okay, Verona's going to pay for 100% of their interceptor pipe. And then we took other items, shared items, and we negotiated the split. So for dewatering, you know, that was, I believe it was 45-55. And so we went through all the bid items, all the bid items in the opinion of probable construction costs to figure out the split, who pays how much for each one, and to make sure the cost looked reasonable. And then at the end, we totaled all those up and we figured out a percentage based on that estimate of the construction costs. Based on that review, we came up with Verona's going to pay 60% of construction costs and we will pay 40% of construction costs. And then the cost split for change orders that'll be decided on a case-by-case basis. So we think this is a fair way to do it. It's fair to both agencies. It takes away any concern about anyone getting a better price than the other party. So it's all determined beforehand, and the only thing then that we are concerned with is what's the final bid price and is that acceptable based on the percentage that we've agreed to pay. One more item on this slide that I wanted to point out. So that's the joint project between, that's what I'm going to call a joint project between Verona and MMSD. There is another project, a Dane County project on here. When we were, oops, sorry, go back. As we were going through easement acquisition, Dane County saw an opportunity for an environmental project that they asked to be included on this. And so we did allow it. So approximately where my cursor is in this triangle area, about 17 acres of invasive species removal. And then also from Lincoln Street in the stream corridor up to the north, where I'm pointing, there's going to be habitat improvement and stream bank protection in the Dane County project. And you'll see their total on the next slide. They're paying for their project, Dane County is, and Verona and MMSD we're going to pay based on the cost split that we've decided. So we advertised in the Verona Press and on Quest CDN in August. It had a lot of interest in this project, which was good. A lot of contractor interest, had 8 pre-qualified prime bidders. We accepted bids on Thursday, September 17th. We received 7, and the low bidder was Minger Construction at about 7.8 million. Now, our portion of that cost, based on that 40%, is 2.95 million, and Verona's portion is 4.4 million. And then that Dane County project that I mentioned, that's $380,000. A little bit about Minger Construction. This is our first time working with them as a prime. They did do a boring for us for the pump station 18 force main. They bored underneath the belt line. They weren't the prime, they were a sub on that one. And they did a good job on that. They're in Jordan, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. Financially stable. They have the equipment and the experience to complete the job. Lots of $10 million plus projects. The photo in this slide, that is from their website. And they had all the necessary documentation, addenda acknowledgement. So we're happy with their bid. And finally, so our recommendations, and this follows the resolution, approve the low overall bid amount of $7,761,804.60 by Minger Construction. Approve the district's portion of that overall bid amount, which is based on that 40% split, 2.95 million. Also increase the approved total of the MMSD project cost from approximately 3 million to approximately $3.5 million. That increase is due to differences between the estimated and the actual bid amounts. This next one it's actually information. It's not a recommendation. Sorry about that. The project costs will be paid from cash reserves. This is not a clean water fund project, and we do have adequate cash reserves to cover those costs. And then finally, authorize the city of Verona to execute the contract on behalf of the district. That's one thing I forgot to mention earlier. The city of Verona, in the MOU, the city of Verona will be administering the contract. And so when the contractor pay requests come in, the city of Verona will pay that, and then they will bill us for our portion. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I've got one.
I-
Eric, could you speak a little more on why the $500,000 difference between the estimated and the actual? What happened? Was there a change in scope, or is it price, is it product or
It was,
location or what?
yeah, it was, sometimes we just get it wrong on the estimate. There was, one of the major items was we actually increased the size of the replacement, not replacement, of the relief force main. So initially, the initial estimate was based on a 16-inch force main. And after hydraulic analysis, it turned out we actually needed a 24-inch force main. So that definitely increased cost, and there were, probably just some bid items. There was probably a little more in the dewatering and a little more more bid items than we had anticipated initially.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Eric, this is Sarah. Thanks for that great presentation. Can you share a little bit more about what I appreciate that we're using cash reserves to finance this. Can you say what went into the decision to use reserves versus Clean Water Fund for this project?
I guess
Speak to that.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Michael.
The size of the project. I think what we're trying to do, we're using probably a general guideline of about $3 million. We will do our best to try to fund those projects through cash instead of debt financing. And it's just us trying to balance the use of cash versus debt, which is the direction we've been receiving from the commission of trying to do that. And this meets that threshold.
That's great. Thanks. I just couldn't remember what that threshold was, but that's great. Thanks for reminding me.
Okay, anyone else?
Question. I've got one. It's Commissioner Meyer. Just making sure, Eric, so you did a good job of explaining the partnership with Verona and sort of the nuts and bolts of how that plays out. I was a little surprised on the county side of it, just because to me that would sound like pretty different work that might require different expertise or whatever. But so the arrangement is the same, that the county's got a chunk of scope, they'll pay for all that. It goes off to the side. We don't deal with paying for it, nor does Verona. But this same prime contractor and or their subcontractors are going to deliver that part of the scope of the work. Am I right on all of those pieces? Is that how this is going to play out?
Yeah, well, yeah, the Dane County is going to pay for their portion, and yes, our prime contractor will, whether they do the work themselves or they'll probably hire a sub to do the work, but they'll be in charge. And I believe they'll send that bill to Verona, and then Verona will likely bill Dane County for their portion of that project.
Okay. But somehow there was the same notion of we'll get some cost savings or avoid any weird duplication or problems by lumping this in, as opposed to letting the county run that whole process, bidding process, et cetera, separately. Is that right?
Yeah, because we're already, have the whole, we've got the process started. We're going to be advertising it. There's some access issues where, they're there, the mobilization costs, that we have the equipment there. So yeah, there's some cost savings for the county on that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that helps. Thanks for that.
Hi, this is Commissioner Bookland, and I do have a question about the bidding. The top two companies were within just a few $1,000s of each other, so they came in really close. So did you look at the second lowest bidder, and did you weigh the pluses and minuses of considering them as well?
Yes, we did, and it was. It's very difficult for us to tell the low bidder that we're not going to take their bid. The second low bidder was Houston, RG Houston, and it was extremely close. The difference was $3,000, which is 0.04%. Is really extraordinary for a $7.8 million project. But yeah, we're constrained to go with the lowest bidder, and Verona is constrained to go with the lowest bidder. So you know, I mean, there, unless there's some real obvious problems with the low bidder, then we have to go with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Tom, I've got one quick thing. I'll just mention about the resolution. I don't know how important this is, but just in case, because it is a resolution.
Yep, go ahead.
As it was included in our packet in item number 1 under the now therefore be it resolved. Sorry, number 2, there's no dollar sign in front of the assemblage of numbers that are meant to represent a dollar amount in US dollars. And I just thought that could be an important enough detail that we should fix it before we agree to it. 2.9 million what?
Yeah.
Dollars.
Yeah, good catch. So are you making a motion to approve with that correction to the resolution?
I absolutely will. Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I do.
so we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer. Do we have with that one correction in the resolution, do we have a second?
This is
I'll
Commissioner
second it.
Eskridge. I'll second.
Let's see, I heard two voices. Was that Commissioner Eskridge seconded?
It was me and Commissioner Bookland. You can use either of us. I
Okay,
think.
we'll go with Commissioner Eskridge. That's who I thought I heard first. So we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Eskridge. Do we have any further questions or comments before we vote? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approval of award for the pump station and to allow Verona to act on the bid price, since we'll be going through them, all in favor say aye.
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 And that also, of course, changes the total project cost. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So I got to get back. I got to find my, go back to the top here just a second to the next item. So that will take us to item number 6, the study session on district pre-treatment approach for engaging commercial and industrial users around per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Marty, you're going to take this?
I am. Thank you, Commissioner Hubble. Nice job on that pronunciation. So I'm going to jump right in here. Some of you should be very familiar with this slide. I like to start out all of my PFAS discussions with this slide to give a little bit of grounding and perspective on where the wastewater treatment plant fits into this large, ever-evolving topic. So the key here is that our knowledge is evolving, and that we really need to understand where we fit in as a district. And that will allow us to understand the pathways that we can control and that we can act upon. So looking at this graphic, you can see it's very circular, and there's an inner part of the circle where I circled in green, which is where our wastewater treatment plant sits. But there's also this outer part of the circle with a lot of other things that could be of interest. And you can see that our wastewater treatment plant is not just a receiver in the middle of the circle, but we also touch the outside of the circle, and that's because of our heavy commitment to resource recovery and reuse. So if you recall, we do have a district action plan around PFAS, and there were 3 broad items that we identified in that plan. And these had related to engaging our industrial and commercial users around PFAS. And some of those 3 major things that we said we would do in our action plan was our sewer use ordinance review, review of our industrial permits, and also looking at how we would begin pollution prevention efforts. And so we chose these 3 broad areas as part of our action plan to make sure that our industrial permittees are aware of potential aspects of their operations that may contribute to PFAS. And we also felt that if we engage our commercial and industrial users early, it would allow us to expand our options and things that we may want to put in place to assure that our PFAS loading or PFAS that is coming to the plant is minimized. And so establishing those relationships will allow us to have a better way to collect data and work with our district permittees in the form of our industrial users. So I'm going to go through each of these specific areas in a little bit more detail so you have a good understanding of the whole suite of approaches we're going to take with our industrial users. The first one I want to talk about is our sewer use ordinance. And so we did complete a review of our current sewer use ordinance, and the goal of that review was to determine the authority that we may have or not have when it comes to regulating PFAS compounds in the collection system. As you're all aware, there are no state standards for PFAS, so we would be looking at how our sewer use ordinance stacks up in the absence of state standards. So the first point I want to bring up about our sewer use ordinance is that it specifically says that we cannot allow discharges that would result in a violation of our WPDS permit or interfere with plant operations. And so this particular prohibition is in state administrative rule and incorporated into our sewers ordinance through reference. So that's this prohibition is generally for all pretreatment programs in the state. It's not specific to the district, but it's in our sewers ordinance. I wanted to call attention to it. Our specifics of our sewers ordinance actually take this prohibition a step further and expands that to a lot more prohibitions. And it basically says that our sewer use ordinance, which has broader prohibitions, you can't put anything in the sewer system that would impact safety, would impact our resource recovery efforts, any detrimental effect, which is actually defined in our sewer use ordinance, and can't result in a condition that a public regulatory agency would find unacceptable. So in combination of the state administrative rules that govern pretreatment programs that we incorporated into our sewer use ordinance, and in addition to our specific provisions in our sewer use ordinance, we really have sufficient authority to look at PFAS compounds when it comes to our industrial users. We definitely can assert authority if we wanted to, and our idea of utilizing a source reduction program to reduce sources of PFAS definitely is within the authority of the sewers ordinance. So our review basically summarized that the way our current sewers ordinance is set up, we have the authority to do what we need to do to help minimize PFAS. So we would not need to make any changes to our sewer use ordinance. The next item in our action plan was reviewing of our industrial permits. So this is specific to our categorical industrial users. And to date, the district has already completed an initial review of our categorical industrial users. And by initial review, I mean that we looked at which specific sectors or industries that we already know manufacture or create PFAS compounds. We were able to look at specific business sectors and understand historically and traditionally the types of compounds they dealt with. And so we took a list and said, okay, do we have any of these, what we call original manufacturers of PFAS compounds in our district, either historically or currently? And our review found that we do not have any current manufacturers or creators of PFAS compounds. We still need to beef up our historical search. As you know, our service area has been around for a very long time and involves many municipalities that have historically lots of industry. So that's something we need to continue. But really, the whole goal of this is to really understand what, if any, PFAS compounds are being used or have been used. The other piece of this, in addition to that review, is to also look at our permit renewal process. So for our categorical industrial users, we are a permitting entity for those users. And so we do have the ability to put permit conditions in place. And so as we go through our permit renewal process, and as we start cross-referencing sectors and potential and probable sources, that's one option we're reserving to work with our industrial users to see if there's any provisions in our permit that we may also be able to utilize to enter in sort of best management practices or other things to help ensure we have reductions of PFAS coming into the collection system. The other thing I wanted to mention is the pollution prevention aspect of this. And before I get deep into it, I just wanted to bring people's memories back to the fact that we did a fate and transport literature review earlier this year, and that did give us an expanded source list. So before I was talking about a source list related to original manufacturers, but now we have to expand that source list to actual users. You may not make it, but you may bring it in and use it. And so we're utilizing our literature review that we did along with other reviews to take that list and begin to assess where in our service area that these commercial or industrial businesses may fall. And so that's the first step, that source identification that we want to do. The other parts of the puzzle for pollution prevention are source minimization and maintaining reductions. So I'm going to go through what each of these entail very quickly, so you all have an understanding of the exact plan of action. The first thing is source identification. I mentioned that literature review, right? That gives us a first cut at potential sources. So that's just a bunch of sectors, a bunch of lists of what potentially PFAS compounds could be used for. And our specific literature review broke some of these sources up into major mass sources, so sources that we know may be potentially contributing higher amounts of PFAS, and sources that we feel, based on what we know about the sector, may be contributing lower masses of PFAS. So that's a first cut as to how we're going to look at some of these sources. And so when you really look into our piece of the puzzle, we were going to look at potential sources. But once we look at our potential sources, we have to take another step. We have to look at, okay, if there's a potential there, what is really the probability that it's actually being used there? And that's where we get into looking at our probable sources. So the easiest way for us to really look at that is to ask our users themselves. What are you using? What do you think you could be using? What are you using that could contain these compounds? What do you know? What do you don't know? It's a very initial information gathering exercise. We plan on using a survey or interview or some type of process to get that information. The other piece of this is to examine what's already happening in the industrial facility. And that would involve maybe reviewing the safety data sheets, looking at the industrial processes and what chemicals may be used, so what is planning to be used, or what comes in sort of certain parts of the processes. And so that becomes a little challenging step, because as we all know, the safety data sheets don't necessarily always provide 100% of the information. And we also know that depending on the ratio and makeup of the chemicals, depending on how much of a certain compound is part of the formulation, may not necessarily give us the best information off the safety data sheets. So this particular part of identifying probable sources will also involve cooperation and partnership with our industrial users, because we may be asking them to reach out to their suppliers to get additional information. So that's understanding our probable sources. Once we get, this short list of probable sources, that's when we then can begin to take the next step of developing monitoring to even verify and understand what those probable sources are actually giving us. And so that's where that linkage to our sampling and analysis plan that you all are familiar with, that we talked about earlier, is where we had different phases and tiers. And the third tier talked about going into the collection system and looking at how we identify probable sources. And that's where that connection comes into play. The next part is source minimization. So once we know what's out there, we identify what's out there, what's probable, then we can make the next step and say, okay, how do we now begin to minimize those sources coming to the plant? And again, I talked about monitoring. That's going to be a big piece of that. We need to work with our industrial users to reduce or eliminate their PFAS compounds, and monitoring is one way to verify that's happening. But really the crux of source minimization is working with our industrial users to figure out what they can do. And there's a lot of options for how to minimize the sources of PFAS. And that can range from product substitution. If you identified a product now that you may not have known before that contains PFAS compounds, maybe there's another product that does the exact same thing as part of your industrial processes that you could switch it out for. Another option could be you could modify your operational controls. For instance, you could have a particular system set up where you are discharging to sewer, but maybe now you can set something up differently where you put it in a holding tank or your waste doesn't have to be discharged and you could treat it more properly as a hazardous waste or some option like that. So sort of changing your operations or how you're controlling your waste stream. And of course, there's always treatment, which for smaller waste streams is effective for PFAS. And the other thing that I think sometimes gets forgotten is when we're talking about these types of PFAS compounds, which are historically around, we could have industrial sites that, the industry that's currently operating is the third or fourth generation industry. And so maybe over time, the reuse of equipment or of the site could be contaminating with PFAS unknowingly the processes. So really looking at the history of the site and making sure that the equipment being used is cleaned properly, waste that's being stored is looked at correctly, and sort of a full-on cleaning audit, so to speak, of your facility could also help minimize the types of PFAS that eventually may go down the drain. So with those three parts, identifying the source, the minimizing the source, we ought to make sure that we actually maintain our minimization of the sources. And so that's when a fully developed pollution prevention program can bring us into the future by ensuring that all of our upfront efforts continue to be maintained. And while we haven't really fully developed our pollution prevention program for this yet, it really would have a strong monitoring component and understanding options for pretreatment systems and product phase outs. And then we also can bring it back to our serious ordinance to understand what our authority is there. And then all that together should help us maintain our good reductions that we hopefully will see through our pollution minimization efforts. And so we'll be monitoring the collection system as well as the plant processes, but also monitoring potentially our industrial users to make sure that we're really able to quantify the reductions that we're seeing. So the next steps, the immediate next steps is for Amanda and I, our communications manager, to work together to begin a process of starting to engage our industrial and commercial users. The plan is not to just send out a letter with a survey and say, hey, tell us what you got. We want to make sure that our industrial and commercial users really understand the context and why we're undertaking this exercise. The idea behind this is to not point the finger and say, you are our source to us, we need you to reduce it or else. The idea is to talk about, we all are in this together. We all potentially could be regulated. And instead of us using the model of we get regulated by our regulatory agency and we pass the buck on to you because we can regulate you, it's more about how can we change what we do together and make things easier for everybody. So when regulations do come on board, we're already in a good position and it may not be as critical or as risky for us since we were ahead of the game. And that's really what we want to make sure our industrial and commercial users understand. So with that, I will pause and get some feedback from you all to make sure that we're on the right track with how we want to approach our industrial and commercial users. And I'll take any ideas, something I missed, or other things we should be considering. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Marty. Anybody have any comments?
This is Commissioner Bookland. I do have a few comments. I want to say that, first of all, I applaud your overall approach. It's really good. And I think that you've thought this through. It's well thought out. I like the fact that you're engaging our industrial users early on. Working with them as partners is really going to be critical to the success of this. And I think an opportunity here would be to also educate some of these users about PFAS in general, you know, and why it's an issue, so that we really do engage them in partnership. I see this as an ongoing long-term effort. This is not just a one-off. And it's going to take a number of resources, both on MMSD's part and as well as our commercial and industrial users. So working together, I agree that material safety data sheets are of limited use because they don't contain 100% of the ingredients, and there may be parts, PFAS may not be even listed. So it's going back even a step further to the suppliers. And so that will take a significant effort. And so have we thought about the FTEs that would be needed on the part of the MMSD in this coming year and going forward to really put this kind of plan into place?
Thanks for that great comment. I took some notes here. And so we have not at this point really thought about FTE needs since we're kind of early, but I do like the way you're thinking and that we should be looking if that's potential need to continue expanding this program. I will say we do have a pretty good pollution prevention team already, and our pretreatment coordinator is a single position. So I guess depending on how things evolve, we may be able to cover some things early on with the current staffing, but I don't think we should rule out additional FTE if we think it's needed. So I appreciate you bringing that up early in the conversation.
Okay, anyone else? Marty, I had a couple questions. So we accept some of the leachate from Dane County landfill. So are we going to be testing that to see how much, are they one of our industrial users?
I knew somebody was going to bring up landfill as a user. Thank you. So when I talked about, the separation of high mass inputs, low mass inputs from potential sources, landfill without a doubt is on that list as a potential high mass source. I don't think I can answer the question, will we be testing the landfill leachate? We'll be asking the landfill to test. I think that's something as we continue conversations with the landfill and our partnership, if that's the best course of action. The good thing is that the landfill, at least the Dane County Rodenfeld landfill, is under permit with the district. So they already have to monitor their leachate and do characterization. So we could ask for that, or we could be doing it ourselves as part of our collection system testing, especially if we know certain manholes near the landfill, it's pretty much only going to be a one stream type of waste. So whether we ask them to test or whether we test, I think we'll be getting verification of what's coming from them. I just couldn't say who's going to be on the quintessential hook, I guess, for that. But it will definitely be a partnership, because testing is only good if you have a plan for what you're going to do with those results and how you potentially can address what you're finding. And we know the landfill has its own challenges because it also receives waste from others, and their options may be limited for what they can do to minimize. Not to say they can't, but that's going to be definitely a relationship partner, one of our bigger, I would guesstimate, mass loads of PFAS to the district. So ongoing with the landfill.
Okay, and a couple other questions. We have, holding tank waste and other wastes that are brought into the district. And so do we need to know where they arrive, if there's any businesses involved? I'm thinking particularly like settling waste that, people have in garages and stuff like that. if that's involved. And then the other one is, how do you handle something like I was thinking about the UW and the, the various testing and product development that, they're at the high. How do you deal with something like that where something may have gone on 5 years ago that involved one of these products or chemicals, but now today doesn't? But that doesn't mean it's not still around, but nobody there may have any institutional knowledge. Do you get what I'm getting at? Maybe it's not important, but I'm just thinking when you have something as complex as the UW with their material sciences and stuff, that that this could be a part of that.
Wow, these are great questions. So I'll start with the research lab UW type of question first. So this is where our collection system investigation and our outreach to understand sources is really important. So for instance, let's just play this out. UW gets one of these questionnaires as we sort of talk to them that this is important information. They fill it out to the best of their ability. But like you said, maybe it will happen 10 years ago and the people there filling it out are unaware. So that's one piece of information. But when we do our tier 3 sampling through collection system, we may find that there's pulses or certain areas of the collection system that are higher than others. And as we trace that back, if it looks like, wow, it's coming from, the area of campus where the material research is happening, chemistry research, then that's where we get back into that. What are the options? Do we look at the pipes? Maybe the pipes have legacy PFAS, so they need to flush them and clean them. Maybe the way they store things in the lab have been done a certain way, and so there's legacy PFAS. So I think it's sort of an ongoing investigation in the sense that you're trying to trace back these sources, but then you do everything you can to eliminate it, do your monitoring and testing, and you hope that you see a decrease. But in those situations, it is difficult because of the historic and legacy nature of the constituents. Not unlike mercury, right? And the way we treat mercury is if we see pulses, we go back and we think maybe some mercury got dislodged that was historic, and we try to trace that back. So we would probably treat it the same way. And I think your other comment on holding tank, so when talking about hauled waste or septage waste, that's definitely a component to the inputs to the plant, which we did identify on our sampling and analysis plan. So as we go through sampling from the plant, that is an identified sampling point for us to understand what's coming in through the hauled waste. And so once we get an initial piece of data on that, then we can begin to pinpoint, okay, is it really the gray water waste or the holding tank waste, as we sort of identify what's coming in through the hauled waste sector. And we'd probably do the exact same thing we would do in our collection system, except through our hauled waste partners, and try to maybe narrow down, okay, wow, gray water always seems to be high, but the grease waste doesn't, or whatever the case is. Now figure out where did the gray water come from. And that would be a way to get us a starting point on some of these, what I tend to call, and what our literature review called, lower mass sources, like the car washes or the carpet cleaner, those types of places. So yes, that's identified in our sampling plan, and we'll use our initial information to then trace back exactly, where that type of waste could be coming from.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
This is Commissioner Swanson.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I just also want to thank Marty for such a really good presentation. And I think it seems like you're really being very thorough and on the right track here. So thanks for that. I was thinking about how PFAS is such a big issue. It has been such a big issue recently, and even beyond water, sewage treatment plants. A lot of other sectors in the country are looking at PFAS right now. My own organization, Green Seal, where we set standards for green products, we are starting to look at prohibiting PFAS compounds in our product standards. And lots of other initiatives. And so I just wanted to mention, or I'm sure you've thought about this, but the importance of somehow plugging into this bigger initiative and looking at ways to share information with others who are also looking at, very similar things.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Swanson. I wrote that down, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when I mentioned this whole idea of product substitution as one way that our industrial users can address minimizing PFAS, I think what you're describing is exactly in that category. And so the more we can plug into what that could be and to assist and be a helpful source for industrial users as to going on that track, I think is going to be helpful for everyone. And we've actually been trying to work with DNR on this particular issue, because it's, it's obviously bigger than just us. And so if we could really have our regulated agency also assist with options for these industries as to how they can reduce PFAS, could just get the word out even better. So I appreciate your bringing that up.
Okay,
Thanks, Marty.
anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I think that kind of concludes this topic. I think the landfill is basically like us. It's a receiver. They don't generate anything. It's waste brought in. It's kind of like we receive water or we receive wastewater, and then kind of like the wells that Madison has that have the substances. They're the water. It's in the water. So I think it gets to Paul's point with the DNR that he made. I think it was last meeting where he talked about how it makes sense to be regulating our outfall when you really should be prohibiting the substances. Because one thing I remember from the DC trip a couple of years ago was that they're pretty common in a lot of materials. Okay, so that will take us to item number 7, Chief Engineer and Director's Report. Michael?
Thank you, President Hubble. I have 4 items to report to you, brief items, some challenging news and some encouraging news, and I'll start with the challenging news. We have a monthly ammonia exceedance and at Badger Mill Creek, and attributable mostly to our construction switchover in our processes and a failure in one of our blowers. But there are some technical elements, and I'm going to defer to Alan Grooms during the operations report, who can explain more about what we know and what happened with that ammonia exceedance. Encouraging news. While I just reported an exceedance, we did receive for 2019 NACWA Silver Award for peak performance for our 2019 complete and consistent permit compliance. So that's good news. We had a really good year last year, and a full year of permit compliance, which is generally standard for us, but that's always good to get that recognition in what's happening. 2 other really exciting projects are catalytic projects, and one of the things we've been working with the Commission on, particularly with Shop 1, is Shop 1 is going to be a space for water conversations. And we envision Shop 1 being a place where we just don't use normal ways of communicating and connecting, but looking at unique ways. And arts and culture are one of those ways where we can connect with the public, because that's where you really connect with hearts and people's values and what they care about, and water is central to that. We are with the U.S. Water Alliance. They've accepted a proposal to begin working with the district will begin working with the U.S. Water Alliance on an arts and culture accelerator program, where we will learn how to work effectively with the arts and culture sector which is different than who we normally work with. We will work to develop a partnership and pilot project with an artist to do a project, and then the U.S. Water Alliance will provide a $20,000 stipend for us to work with an artist on that type of a project. And it will also involve a peer learning component, a national peer learning component, because there are other utilities in the country who will be taking part in this accelerator program. So we're really excited for us to do this. I want to just commend Marty Griffin and his team for identifying this opportunity and for being able to secure it. It's a new program that the U.S. Water Alliance is moving forward on. The second item that has been led by our ecosystem services team, and this is the next slide, Janelle, is the Pumping Station 8 mural project. And this project is a partnership with the University of Wisconsin, and it is a first ever Science to Street art project, and it's funded by the University of Wisconsin, and it's really there to visually inspire science, technology, engineering, art, and math education and careers through placemaking. And we've selected Pumping Station 8 because this is one of the areas where we've had some challenges with graffiti. So I guess one brand of public art, I guess, with this more formalized approach. And these are photographs of some of the students actually putting the mural up. These are photographs from a couple weeks on Pumping Station 8, and I'm sure we'll follow up, and maybe Marty will follow up at a future commission meeting with the completed mural. So those are really encouraging new ways for us to connect with the public and to make a One Water statement and a story about One Water and its link to science. So with those items, I'll turn it back over to you, President Hubble, unless there was any questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Thanks, Michael. That was some interesting projects, and to Marty as well for his and his team's work on a couple of those items. Okay, that will take us to the regulatory and legal review. Vanessa, you're sitting in for Paul.
Good morning. I am sitting in for Paul. Thanks for having me today. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Just a couple of points on the regulatory review, mostly related to PFAS, as that continues to be a primary issue at the regulatory level. The Wisconsin PFAS Action Council met last month and released a draft final PFAS action plan. There are a couple of opportunities for public comment on that plan. One is October 6th, when the WISPAC will be holding a listening session, and then they'll be accepting written comments on the draft action plan through October 8th. And then they'll meet again October 15th to work on finalizing that plan before it goes to the governor's office for approval. DNR also recently held a stakeholder meeting on the water quality standards rules that they continue to move forward. That was at the end of August. It sounds like from that meeting that DNR is continuing to pursue numeric water quality standards, but may also be evaluating the option of imposing narrative criteria or some sort of BMP option for compliance. One other item, the PFAS firefighting foam bill that was passed this last spring. DNR is continuing to move forward on emergency rules for implementing that law. There was some comment received that delayed the Natural Resources Board approval of those emergency rules. So those, there was a listening session on those rules on September 15th, and then the board is going to be taking those back up at their October meeting. I think those are the highlights at this point. I did want to just point out too that there were septage rules recently. Economic impact analysis for revised septage rules was recently open for public comment. Those rules relate mostly to septage haulers and not receivers of hauled waste. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I hear none.
Before
so
Alan,
oh,
before
you're
Alan,
up.
before Alan jumps in, and this is probably in the legal category, but we have had, the district has met with the DNR officials regarding the bacteria and the extended disinfection season. We had our first meeting, which went very well. The district proposed interest-based problem solving, which is an approach that the DNR has not used before. It's a process of looking at interests instead of positions. They've agreed to that process. And the district is taking the lead in hiring an expert in interest-based problem solving from MATC. It's the same facilitator we use for the Employee Leadership Council. And they will be, I'll be setting up likely 2 meetings in the next, it might take us a couple of months to actually get all the key people together to see if we can work through our interests and reach a resolution without going into a contested case hearing. And at least this is my personal opinion. I'm very encouraged by where this is going to go. I wanted to slip that in there, and then I'll turn it over to Alan.
Thanks, Michael. Alan?
All right, this is the first time me doing this, so we'll see how this goes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, trust we can. Okay, so operations report for the month of August. You've got the details in your packet. We'll first go through plant performance. Effluent limits for the most part were pretty good, right in line with what we would expect. Phosphorus at 0.31, so about half the limit that we're allowed. But that's pretty typical performance for this time of year for us. CBOD continues to be good. Solids continues to be good. Chloride, fecals. We're on the home stretch with that old UV system, so that's continuing to, I think we're going to make it, knock on wood. But as you can see, this is the first time we've had to create a dashboard dial that shows a red line over the limit. So what we had, as Michael mentioned, we had a monthly average on ammonia of 1.34 milligrams per liter on our discharge effluent. And our numbers on that typically are under 0.5. 1.1 is our summertime limit through the end of September. What we experienced was, and I'll actually get into more detail on that a little bit. It was just on the, I've got a more detailed slide on that particular metric to explain what happened there. Resource recovery, these numbers, again, through August, just rough rule of thumb as you look at these, if you divide by 2, multiply by 3, it's about 2/3 what our yearly total would be. So we're right on track where we want to be, where we expect to be on struvite. We're looking at the about 680, 690 tons of struvite that we'll ship out this year. Clean water, we're a little bit lower than we have been. We're looking to be on track for about 16, a little under 16 billion gallons for the year. That's, unless we get a wet stretch, that's probably about where we're going to come in. We've had a fairly dry year. Biogas is going to come in right around 290,000. All of these look to be projected about where we would expect to be. Again, the exceptions being on the Metro Mix product. We had a lot of product we made early in the year to deal with the lack of storage because of the early weather shutdown on fall hauling last year. And then as we rolled into spring, having that lack of storage, we needed to get that out because we didn't know when the fields would open up. So there was a mix of Class A and Class B product created early part of the year. We haven't made any more of that Metro Mix, that cake product. We just in the past few weeks got the last of that hauled to landfill. So we are set to restart that process when when we're ready to take that on from ecosystems. So any quick questions on the two slides I've shown so far before I get into a little bit more detail on the exceedance? Okay, hearing none. Go to the slide I really would prefer not to present. So Badger Mill Creek, we have two outfall points, Badfish Creek and Badger Mill Creek. Our monthly limit, and when I present the limits on these, it gets more complicated if you look into the permit, because we've got daily limits and weekly limits and monthly limits, and they're different for the outfalls and they're different by season of the year. So when I put down 1.1 for the ammonia, that's reflecting the most restrictive limit for the year, for the condition we're under. So in this case, 1.1 to Badger Mill Creek is the most restrictive ammonia limit that we operate under. So for the month of August, we averaged 1.34. There were several contributing factors to this. First, just kind of recalling the weather in the latter part of August, we really had the heat and humidity came up. So kind of think back to our physics, hot, humid air is less dense, and that less dense air, then it makes, we struggle even on a good year to deliver enough air at times because of just the environmental conditions. And, that's definitely during design, that's a sizing criteria. What do you expect the worst day to look like? So I suppose as I think back on this, 30, 40 years ago, when some of these blowers went in, the effects of climate change, that picture looking at 20 years ahead, you factor in what you expect your worst day to look like. And I would say that we're seeing more hot, humid days than we've had in the past. So that's an aspect that we'll need to address going forward in liquid processing. That alone, that was a contributing factor, but the big issues were we had two events, one that was planned and the other was a result of something that didn't go according to plan. So August 20 to 22nd, we were shifting for construction, taking plant 3 where construction had been completed, putting it back online and moving that biomass, from plant 4 to plant 3. To do that process, we have to shut down half the plant for about a day. And so that pushes a lot of flow to one side. It really overloads. It's really a simulation of a high flow event. And the biomass, no matter how much preparation we do from an operations standpoint, we really can't prepare well for that. So, we kind of expected that higher flow. We saw that in July as well. When we did the initial shutdown, we had about a 3-day excursion where the ammonia went up, but because it was just a small 3-day excursion and the rest of the month was fine, it didn't, our monthly numbers were good. So we averaged for those 3 days when we shifted flow over and then shifted it back 5.2 milligrams per liter for those 3 days. And then we kind of went back to our normal. The following week for construction, we needed to do what we call a blower rotation. So it's basically turning off one blower and turning another one on. That's very difficult to do with tanks down. And so, but we needed to do it for the construction to progress. When we did the rotation, getting the blower restarted proved to be a lot more challenging than anyone anticipated. We had a lot of issues getting that started. And we actually had to abandon the attempt, go back to a different blower and hold up that work and then come back and try it again the next day, where we were successful. But that, those outages in the West plant, they allow some fouling of the diffusers to occur. And so that actually takes a couple days to recover from that. So we had that second excursion here in late August. We averaged 4.4 milligrams per liter for that period. So the two of those combined in that same month was just too much for our numbers. So, and just a point of emphasis, the Badfish Creek limit for the month is 1.8 milligrams per liter. We were under that limit. Like I said, typically we average about 0.3 to 0.5 on ammonia. So it's typically not really a concern for us. In fact, I can't recall any time that ammonia has been really a real concern on our effluent numbers. So, but I was sad to report that because that's going to go in as a single violation. So, Michael noted earlier we had the Silver Peak Performance Award. The single violation will still be eligible for that, provided we don't have any more issues, and I certainly don't expect any more. So I fully anticipate to get another silver next year, but having something like this, you'd like to go for the gold, and so that will disqualify us for the gold. I don't know if that answers any questions that might be out there. If anyone wants to explore any of these factors in a little bit more detail.
I have a question, Alan. What's it do in terms of our permit with the DNR? Do we kind of get a pass on the first one violation like this, or is that kind of a downgrade?
Yeah, it factors into our annual report, our CMAR that Drew presented, I believe, last month to the commission. That annual report will show, how many limit violations and things like that we have. We typically really don't have anything other than the past. We've had some chloride violations. So it's typically not a big deal from that standpoint. I don't want to diminish it because we take a lot of pride in meeting our limits, and we obviously want to avoid this. But it is a reportable. So, made a call to DNR, reported the violation, talked to them. DNR indicated that if this was something that, we were a plant with a history that does this repeatedly, or if we're doing it month after month, then that might be looking at things like enforcement action. That I suppose is possible, but that isn't DNR's practice. They aren't really looking to come in and lay the hammer down. They're really looking, we're really kind of on the same side. We're really basically after the maximum, we're trying to protect the environment. And so, looking at that, their attitude was actually, they probably took it better than I did, to be honest, at least when I called in. So it'll go on as a violation, but it's not something I expect anything other than perhaps in a couple of months, we'll probably get a letter indicating that you've looked at it and we're okay with it. I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Hubble.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You bet. All right.
Okay.
That's all I've got.
That's all you've got? Okay, so that will take us to the future meeting schedule that's in the packet. So the next meeting will be in October, and I don't have the specific date in front of me right now. So any future agenda topics or other business? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Wilson, move adjournment, please.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by?
I'll second Commissioner Meyer.
Second by Commissioner.
I didn't know if you were there.
Yeah, I saw Mary's light, but I didn't hear her. Okay, second by Commissioner Meyer to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Stay
Likewise.
safe. Enjoy the beautiful
Take
weather.
care.
Bye.
Bye.